Please, can you give us an overview of the past 2 years, especially as it has impacted on industry, productivity, employment, perhaps the general public? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. First, let me say that the last 2 years has been very, very turbulent. It has been very challenging for those who are managing the economy. It has been very challenging for those who are investors in the economy. It has been very challenging for those who are citizens of the country. Uh, a lot of pain, especially arising from the cost of living, cost of production, instability, uncertainty, and so many more. But it's important to contextualize this, because I must say that the administration at inception was grappling or had to grapple with a number of legacy macroeconomic issues. So the economy was practically on the brink as at the time the administration came on board. So that led to the imperative of the need to urgently stabilize the economy. And of course, this also has its toll on the general populace. Of course, the stabilization of the economy necessitated a couple of reforms, some of which the chairman alluded to. We had the foreign exchange policy reform, which was about the convergence of the exchange rate. We had the fuel subsidy removal, which led to, of course, an escalation of prices. So the economic cost was very high because of the impact on the cost of production. The social cost was also extremely very high because of the impact on the lives of the people. And the political cost was also very high because the government became very unpopular. But I must say that these reforms were inevitable in my view, to bring the economy, back from the brink. The external position was extremely very bad. In the private sector, we had a situation where if an investor demanded for say $100,000 to import raw materials of machineries, the best you could get at that time was maybe 10% of that or 20%. Imagine what that did to many investors. And we got to a situation where our letters of credit were no longer being honored by our correspondent banks abroad. It was that bad that if you wanted to do any transaction, the importers were asking for cash and carry. It is completely an aberration in international trade. So that showed how bad things were. So the reserves was almost completely collapsed. The net reserve was possibly less than $5 billion US. And that led to a situation where we had some desperate moves on the part of the administration at that time to salvage the situation. There was the securitization of our foreign reserves, and the securitization of our crude oil sales, just to be able to fill the gap, so that the system can continue to run. But of course, that was not sustainable. Then we had very serious issues around printing of money. That time, at the end of that administration, we had money printing of over 20 trillion naira, most of which were not even reflected in the budget. So there was a major transparency issue. It was later that the National Assembly had to walk back in a very unusual way to now be approving that humongous amount just to try to regularize and normalize those things. But of course, there was very little they could do. So these were some of the key challenges. But over the last 2 years, it seems to be gradually turning the corner. And let me also admit at this point that the reforms that took place, many of us who are economists had canvassed for it. Because we all saw the massive corruption around the foreign exchange market. We saw the massive corruption around the subsidy regime. But what we did not anticipate was the enormity of the social cost on the citizens. You know, this is economics. Economics is not physical science. So most times you cannot predict accurately the outcomes of policy. So one of the outcomes we saw was that the social cost was disproportionately higher than what we expected. Because most of us who were economists at that time were saying that the fuel subsidy was being enjoyed only by the rich, people who are riding SUVs and so on. But when the subsidy was removed, we now realize that it was not only the rich that was benefiting from the subsidy, because we saw the impact. The same thing with Forex. When we had the previous regime, exchange rate was 450. That was also a subsidy environment. And we felt that the major beneficiaries at that time were those who were enjoying the arbitrage opportunities. But when the exchange rate was converged and we unified the rate, we now also realize that even the citizens were also benefiting in some ways, you know, from the subsidy in the foreign exchange, because we saw the impact of that on the general price level, you know. So I think it's important but let me also say that over the last 2 years, because of the steps that have been taken, we are seeing evidence of, you know, some improvement in the stabilization of the economy. We have seen some, at least in the last 8 months, we have seen an improvement in the stability of the currency. The volatility that we witnessed in 2023 up to maybe first half of 2024, that volatility had reduced significantly. You know, the fuel situation has also improved. Of course, the price increase was very huge. The shock was enormous. But in terms of availability, in terms of, you know, confidence of investors, in terms of the incentive for people to now have the confidence to invest in the downstream sector, I mean, we have seen an improvement. We have seen the Dangote refinery come on stream and it's doing fairly well. As we speak now, we are in a position not to even import petroleum products at all. That policy regime has also helped the sustainability of that investment. But I must also admit that, yes, we have seen some benefits of those reforms. We have seen an improvement in the fiscal environment. And what I mean by that is, you know, the revenue to government at all levels. But what we have not seen, the democratization of the benefits of those reforms. In other words, the benefits have not sufficiently trickled down, you know, to the citizens. We probably have more billionaires today than we had 3, 4, 5 years ago. As you have probably more poor people today than we used to have, because of the fact that the redistribution objective of the reform has not been properly achieved. But when we are removing the subsidy, the whole idea was to take the subsidy away from those who are benefiting from it and restore it to the citizens in a way that it will be a lot more inclusive. That I think we have not achieved much of. Then, of course, there is the issue of productivity, because part of the key objectives of government, ideally, should be to stabilize the economy, then also to ensure that we have an economy that is productive. That productivity challenge, we haven't made much progress in terms of the fact that, you know, the cost of production. I mean, when I was working here, I had one big generator working there. That is diesel. That's a lot of money, and that is the story all around. So we haven't made much progress in terms of, you know, productivity, particularly from electricity. In terms of the infrastructure, well, I think we have seen some evidence of improvement. Riding from here to Mile 2 and to Oshodi, it doesn't used to be as smooth.
Oh yes.
Now we can move.
We can say that.
Yeah,
We can say that
within 10 minutes from Oshodi, yeah. You know, of course, it was not started by this year, but it was completed, you know, during the life of this year. And we have seen pockets of that, Lagos, Ibadan. Macroeconomic stability, we have seen some progress. Productivity-wise, we are not there yet. The social outcomes of the reform have been very, very devastating, and we are still struggling with the appropriate model to allow the benefits of the reform to trickle down to the ordinary citizens, so that we can make the reform a lot more inclusive. We talk about security now. Even Michael Kiro, and I've even seen serving officers complain about extremely poor funding. Poor.
extremely poor.
You said the federal government is doing well.
Yeah.
But they have to protect
Extremely poor.
I know now.
Not to talk of the issue of transparency in spending. You need to ask some of these DPOs whether they even have any budget. And it's the same across all these service. You know, I don't think there is any serious audit of how all this. I mean, if somebody is not well prepared, not well treated, and you push him to the front line, it's like asking him to go and commit suicide. I listened to the commissioner of police last week. He was receiving AIG in charge of the zone in the north, whether it is Borno or Kebbi or something. And the man was lamenting publicly on camera how his men don't have this bulletproof jacket. They don't have this, they don't have that. And yet we expect that kind of team to police such a volatile area. How would that happen? So even them, they are also children of people. They are fathers of people, they are husbands, they are wives. I mean, people also care about their own people. How do you throw somebody like that poorly equipped and say you should go and face all this, all this? So it's a very, very big problem. Apart from the fundamental issue of funding, there's also the issue of the quality of the spending. You have a big budget every year. Defense has the biggest budget. Are we getting value for money? We need to interrogate all of these things. So I just think I need to, and of course, we need to also talk more about technology. I mean, people are using technology because it's even cheaper for you to use technology to deal with some of these things. So I don't know how much effort we are making. I mean, all sorts of places, people are using technology, Israel, many places like that. What does it cost? Is it not cheaper to use drone to go and attack than to be mobilizing about 10 years people in hillocks, 10, 15 who can be ambushed and killed?
Dr. MUDA YUSUF, in the coming 2 years, what do you expect? What would you recommend to the federal government as the direction of the economy? The best way to make this economy work for everybody?
Well, first, let me say that when we discuss economy, we should not limit conversation only to the federal government. Because there's always that tendency that everything is about the federal government. Between the states and local government, they account for about 50% of the resources. And just as I said at the beginning, this reform has elevated their revenues. So therefore, they have more to account for at all levels, with federal, states, and the local government. So alongside our interrogation of what is happening at the federal, we should also be mindful of the need to interrogate what is happening at the states. Because if we compare it, we even have some debate around federal. Budget will come, we look at how much they are using to buy cutleries, to buy this, all sorts of things. At least we must give credit to them for that. They put that in public space. Every details, granular details of what they spend in each of the ministries. But how many states provide that? So that engagement at the subnationals is extremely very, very important. Subnationals also have a big role to play in education, because part of the reasons we have all this insecurity problem is because most of those areas where we have insecurity problem, they do not pay attention to education over the years. Because we are just reaping the negligence of 15, 20 years. I like to say that going forward, this is a totally beyond. For us to ensure that we have a vision in terms of national plan. at every association. Not a situation where everybody the manifesto will now be taking the place of our national economic plan. Let us have a consensus around our economic vision as a country. This is the way it's done in many other advanced countries. So even if you are crafting your manifesto, let it align with that vision. So I don't have people pushing us around every 4 years. So we should have a vision to which our short-term, medium-term manifesto, whatever it is, will be aligned to, that all of us are on the same page. And possibly we can even legislate that kind of vision. That this is our vision 2050 or whatever it is. This is where we want to go as a country. So we are coming in as an administration to key into it. Secondly, it's about our fiscal policy. We need to worry about the level of our debt. The level of our debt is getting to levels that are not sustainable. And because if you look at our debt service to revenue now, it's getting close to maybe 80% or more. We compare our debt service to our capital budget, it's far, far higher than what we are doing spending on capital. And to do that, we need to worry about first, the amount of debt we take. Second, we should take less foreign debt because they are more difficult to service because of foreign exchange. Third, we should worry about the cost of the debt. You know, we now have a situation where domestic debt, government is taking facility, federal government bonds sometimes around 20, 22, treasury bills over 20. These things are very costly. And these things have implications for debt service burden. So we need to tone down that. And if you are taking debt, for God's sake, let us commit the debt to building domestic capacity to be more productive. Not just spending money on some things that you can hardly put your fingers on. And say you are doing empowerment, you are doing poverty reduction, humanitarian. Let us invest our debt on building capacity to build the economy. That is extremely important. Then our monetary policy, yes, the central bank has talked about orthodox monetary policy. That is fine. But we have to define the limits of the orthodoxy. Because orthodox monetary policy is about allowing the market to dictate the direction of policy. That is what has brought our interest rate to the level to which it is today. Our CRR, cash reserve ratio, is 50%, is the highest in the whole world. Our MPR, monetary policy rate, is 27.5, it's one of the highest in the whole world. And you can see how much people are paying now to take facility from the bank. 30%, 35%. What kind of investment can anybody do with that kind of interest rate? We should define the limits of this orthodox monetary policy. And we should also create a window of concessionary financing for the real sector of the economy. You cannot undertake either agriculture, construction, property investment, manufacturing with an interest rate of 30%. It cannot work. And we need the private sector to be part of this journey. They cannot be part of this journey if their source of financing is this side. So we need to look at our monetary policy. And generally, in terms of economic philosophy, we should define the limits of market economy. You know, yes, it is good to allow the market to guide our policies, but we should define the limits. That's what you call market failure. When market fails, that means market cannot deliver the outcomes that you want. So that means that you have to ensure government intervention to fill the gaps that the market cannot fill going forward. So we need to be conscious of that. Trade policy, we need to worry about, emphasizing revenue targets for the customs. Because the more you put pressure on them to go and generate revenue, the more they transfer the pressure to the private sector. And at the end of the day, we make investment extremely very difficult because the custom is trying to meet its revenue target. So we should have a balance
You have to be conscious of the fact that if you make it easier for people to invest by reducing the pressure on them, either in terms of import duty rates or these levies at the port, it is better for the economy. If they are able to invest more, the economy will grow, and ultimately the revenue to government will grow. Then in terms of our trade policy as well, we should look at critical sectors of the economy and reduce their import duty for their raw materials. The lady, Memuna, talk about zero tariff on pharmaceuticals, raw materials in particular, and equipment. We can do something similar to those who are in food processing, for instance, to reduce their cost, because we are talking about access to food. Let us see what we can do to use fiscal policy to reduce the cost of those who are in the food processing industry, so that the cost of indomie, the cost of bread, the cost of noodles, all these things can come down, even cooking gas and so on. So we need to craft or calibrate our trade policy, to be sensitive to the cost of living. And generally, the government should do a lot more across all levels, not just the federal now, on education, on health, because not every citizen can put their children in private schools. Private schools are becoming prohibitive. And investment in education is investment in the future of the country. So if you're able to make it easier for people to have access to education, you don't say because your parent cannot afford to pay school fees, then you can't go to school. It should be regarded as a right. So we need to see more investment in education, in health, so that families will spend less of their income trying to pay school fees, trying to pay hospital bills, trying to pay for transportation. But these things are exerting a lot of pressure on family budgets. And once you have that kind of pressure, you don't have discretionary income. You don't have discretionary income. How will you be able to buy clothes, buy bags, buy things that other people are producing? And these are things that make the economy go round. So we need to do a lot more. Of course, we have discussed insecurity and all of that. So, well, it's a very big subject. Let me just stop there. These are some of the things I think we should be focusing on, at least in the next 2 years, because all these issues are about social sector. It's about making the economic management more inclusive. We don't want an economy that is leaving too many people behind. That is why I think the government should do a lot more in the area of this education, health, food systems, and public transportation. We need to see a lot more government budget going into that area. So that's my submission.